Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Wandering Road podcast. I'm your host, Chris, alongside my co host, Dean. And for today's show, we are joined by Amanda, who's coming on to share her paranormal experiences. Hey Amanda, thanks for joining the show today.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
When we saw that you reached out to us and you considered our show, to share your paranormal stories for the first time, we feel completely honored and humbled that people, one, listen to our show religiously. We appreciate everyone that does, and two, for considering us as a platform to share your experiences. So we're super excited to hear your story today.
No, thank you. Like I said, thank you guys so much again. I've been listening to you guys nonstop. Literally, I don't even barely listen to music anymore. I just throw you guys on. I'm like, yeah.
It's awesome, but it's still so weird. We talked about this right before we started recording, but it's just like every time I think about it, it's like, wow, people are listening to us. And like we said, we're just like average people, like the people listening. It's really surreal. So it's just really awesome, though, to have a moment in your life. Like we live in this day and age where you can totally do this. We're trying to take off more, but like even if it doesn't accelerate as fast as we want to, like it's still awesome that we reached this point. Yeah, thanks for joining us. We've actually taken a little bit of a break, Chris, huh? Like we both stepped away for a while and now we're coming back with Amanda to restart a cycle of continuous recordings for Fridays. So this is the first in a new line. So probably, good luck. We're going to start with this one.
Well, I feel honored by that. Yeah.
So, Amanda, what do you remember as your earliest paranormal experience? How did you get into the paranormal if you were ever interested in that from a very young age?
So, my family, I feel, just has this thing about them where they just are attracted to them, I guess. Whether it be spirits, whether it be demonic or it be angelic. I grew up in a very religious home. Both my grandparents were Christian. And because it was kind of like not necessarily forced upon me as a kid, but it just was very uncomfortable for me. So I didn't really believe in anything. My grandfather, because we are half Cherokee Indian, he was the one that got me really into that stuff because he grew up on an Indian burial ground on a farm because we had a farm. A lot of my family, they have owned a lot of farms and a lot of them had been on Indian burial grounds. So one of the stories when I was about like 6 or 7 years old, he shared with me that when him and my grandmother lived on the farm, they had this woman that lived miles away from them. And she had no transportation. So every morning for like weeks on end, my grandfather was very picky and like OCD when it came to locking doors, where he would like deadbolt them. Well, he would tell me that she would be in the house sitting at the dinner table with a cup of coffee and absolutely no way or no sound of her coming in. So that kind of weirded me out. Now, me, the type of person I am, I try to like analyze everything and figure out everything and trying to piece everything together. Nothing was adding up the way that he was describing it. So that was my first like paranormal story. And then later on down the years, it just started getting, more and more interesting. And my mom recently told me over the weekend while I was in Florida that my great Granny Boone, she had an experience where she was sleeping and this woman appeared at the edge of her bed and she swore by it until she passed away. She swore that she seen this woman and they lived again on a farm, a family farm, but it did have a fireplace. So this fireplace was obviously very old. They didn't build the home. They had purchased it from somebody. And when she seen the woman, she said that the woman was pointing to her and then over by the fireplace. So my Grand Boone, she asked her, "What do you want?" And I guess there's a someplace verse in the Bible that if you ask a spirit what it wants, it'll tell you or signal or something. So it literally, told her to follow it. She would gesture to follow her and then point to Like this, it freaks me out just constantly talking about it. So she walked her to the fireplace, pointed to it. So that happened for 3 nights in a row. And the weirdest thing is everything happens in threes with my family and with me particularly. So on the third night, my granny Boone finally, her and her husband, they decided to take the fireplace apart. So like I said, it was very old, so the bricks were already like halfway coming off. So they had pulled several of these things off. They found, guys, a giant lock of hair with a bow on it. And I was like, nope. I would have left the house. Like, there's no way I would have been able to deal with that.
That's the beginning of a horror movie right there, I think.
Right, dude. I'm like, with half the crap that I'm about to tell you, yeah, we could stories. And my uncle actually wanted to, but then he was like, just got too freaked out by it. So yeah, it's been like generations worth of paranormal, and unfortunately not the good parts happened for me when I was younger. I was 15 years old. I had a very traumatic thing that happened to me in my life with a family member. So at 15, I used to play this game called Gaia Online. I don't know how old you guys are. So Gaia Online was this little game that you would just play, and you would create your character and just build on it and just buy little items and stuff, and you talked and you chatted with people. Well, I was very introverted back then, I will point that out. Like, I didn't really talk to people. You guys ever watch the anime Comey Can't Communicate? I can relate because that's basically how it was for me. So I had met a couple of people on there and got to meet them in person. I never really told my grandparents about this, but I always felt like something was watching me. And I want to make this perfectly clear. And this is why it was very hard for me to come out even to you guys. Because at the age of 15 and growing up, I didn't pay too much attention to the internet. I didn't really care about it except for my video games. So what I'm getting at with that is when demons and all this stuff, or how they're described, like the Slender Man or shadow people and stuff like that, I had zero clue what any of that was. And when I felt like there was this, it just felt like such a negative energy behind me. And I haven't talked about this for a very long time. So it just felt like something was just constantly hovering behind me. And I was always freaking out. And I was like, what the hell is this? What does this feel like? I don't understand. So one night I was in the kitchen and my grandfather was sitting at the table and my grandmother was washing dishes. And I went to go get a drink of water from the refrigerator. This entity or whatever, it obviously wasn't good. It was demonic. I'm just going to put it out there. And you'll understand why I know it was later on. So I opened the refrigerator and went to go get a glass of water, and it, for once, for a very long time, touched my shoulders. I screamed. I kicked the door shut and pushed my back up against the cabinets. And my grandmother was like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, what's going on? And I screamed and I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. I don't know what's going on with me. My grandfather finally came into the room after I went into my room, and he asked me what happened. And I told him briefly, and he said, well, you need to pray. And I'm like, well, I don't pray. I didn't know how. Didn't get any of it. So one night I went on Gaia, and this kid and the one other girlfriend I made friends with, they were just chatting with me and we're doing little quests and stuff together. Now, keep in mind, I did not mention anything to this kid. And he asked me, what is that you're dealing with? And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? So, and for whatever, my brain will not allow me to remember this kid's name. And I'm really good with remembering names half the time, especially with people that I've connected with really well. And at this time, I was 16. So it was already going on for a year. So he asked me again, what is it that's going on with you? And I was like, I really don't know what you're talking about. So he was like, I feel like something is in your house with you. And I was like, oh no, oh hell no. That was too much for me, that somebody was already sensing. And I had never mentioned anything to this person, nothing. It never came up in conversation, nothing. So I found out that he was Christian and his father was a priest, and we were both 16 at the time. And he was like, Amanda, you need to pray. And again, I was like, I don't know what I'm praying for. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to even begin. So this was the night. It was around maybe 11:30 or so. I'm just gonna ballpark it. Like, I know it was near 12 o'clock for sure, because that's when I was sneak on, like, when my grandparents went to sleep. When I logged on, that's when that was going on. And y'all remember the damn razor phones that we used to have? All right, well, I have
Oh
one
yeah.
of those.
I had one too.
Yeah, with the dragon on it, man. The style. So he asked if he could text me. And I was like, yes, that's fine. Well, for the first time, this thing had presented itself in full-fledged, whatever the fuck you want to call it. And he said, when he texted me, he's like, look, let's get off of the game. I'm going to text you. And I was like, okay, that's fine. And he started reciting a prayer. And I was like, okay, this doesn't make me feel comfortable. It felt like, Jesus Christ, it felt like something pushing down on me, even though I'm just like I'm sitting here right now. It felt like such heaviness coming down on me. Even talking about this is kind of making me nervous because, like I said, I haven't talked about it in a very long time. So as he's reading off this scripture, this thing goes from behind me. It's small at the beginning, but then it's like it rises up above me, and then right in the corner of my room, I seen it. And oh my God, the best way to describe this fucking thing is it was very small. And the way that I can describe it now is thanks to Lord of the Rings. The size of it was about how Smeagol kneels down. But it was so black. It was blacker than, and I've heard people say this in you guys' podcast, blacker than black. And I'm like, holy shit, I know what that's like. But the problem is, it had sockets, but there was nothing there. But the creepiest part about what made me freak out even more is the hands were long, the fingers were long, and it kind of like made like, I don't know how to describe it while talking, but just like curled and just slouched, but it just grinned at me. And when it grinned at me, it just had thousands of teeth, almost like Cheshire Cat shit, but 10 times worse. I literally took my phone, guys. I chucked that bitch as far as I could, and I ran. And we lived on acres of land because we lived on another farmhouse. That's where all my life I've basically been in farmhouses. I chucked the phone, I ran, because when that thing appeared, he was saying in the name of God. And then that's when it came around. I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I'm internally shaking, and I know you guys can't see that, but I'm sure you can hear it in my voice.
If you need
So
to take a breather, you can.
I rather just get it out. Just
All
how
right.
I am.
Sounds good.
Power through it. So it was about there, and like I said, we lived on acres of land, so I booked it. And my grandparents were asleep. Like I said, I hauled ass out of the door. I didn't care if anybody heard me. I was screaming at the top of my lungs, God help me, somebody help me, please help me get it away. So about 30 minutes go by. I finally get the courage to go back into the house. I picked up my phone, and my friend is still on the phone, like texting me, are you okay? Where are you? I'm not going to stop texting you until you answer me. So I looked directly in the area where the thing was. Nothing was there. The room didn't feel as heavy, but because I was so freaked out, I feel like I was just making myself more nervous. What bothers me and it hurts me is that my friend said, listen, I can't. When I reassured him that I was okay and I was still there, he asked me, is it still there? I said no. At that time, guys, I had no time. I was in the process of explaining it to him, what it looked like. I didn't have to say shit to him. The following text, after I had said, I am okay, it is not here anymore, but I still feel scared. He's like, it's okay. You don't have to worry. But what I'm about to tell you, you can't be sad. I can't talk to you anymore because it's here with me now. And I was like, oh, hell no. So he literally described it to the fucking T of what it looked like. And he said that it was in his window. I said, and that was the last that I heard from him. Like I physically had to stop talking to him. So that sucked. And that was, like I said, when I was 16 and all that happened. And and he did take it away. He did. It just really breaks my heart that I had to, like, he took something away from me, but brought it to him. So I don't know what happened to him. I never known to this day. And that's when I was 16. So
This is
Right.
such a unique story, but there are also elements that we've touched on in the past with other people. So I do have to ask, like, what do you think? Because you said that you had this sensation for a long time before this event happened that something was behind you or above you. I think Chris has experienced it. I've experienced that as well before. It's just this feeling sometimes you get like something's behind you. And
yeah.
that's a really interesting phenomenon that humans have sometimes. And we've actually talked to people on the podcast before, like yourself, with stories who have shared the same thing, where they get the sense that there's something behind them, and then it just grows and grows and grows in terms of sensing that to the point where it's a heavy gravity, like something is just pressing down on you
Yeah.
constantly, and then something snaps and happens. So I think that's something to call out in your experience as unique and significant because other people have experienced it as well. But I have to ask you, well, you've reflected on that story many, many times throughout your life, it sounds like, but this is the first time you've actually explored it verbally in a while. So I'll ask you, like, what do you think was going on? What do you think this thing was that was with you? Like you said, it was demonic, but do you have any sense of whatsoever how it attached to you,
Yeah.
or what was going on?
I'm not, I mean, you guys can keep this in here. It doesn't bother me because, I've obviously went to therapy for this stuff. So my family was a very negative atmosphere. I do not drink or smoke for this reason. It was drug abuse, it was alcohol abuse, it was constant arguing, constant fighting in the home. So that just stuff like that to me just brings on negativity. And as we all know now, those things like to grab onto negativity. So, as I mentioned before, when I was 15, something traumatic happened to me with a family member. So, I feel like that was the utmost vulnerable moment that this fucking thing had. Like, okay, she's already in a depressive state. Now she's even in a more depressive state. I got it. Like, this is it. This is where I can reside. And so before any of that had happened to me, I should have mentioned that I've always felt negative in the house that I grew up in because of all the fighting and the arguing. And it was just too much for me. And that was going on since I was 2 to 3 years old. And it was just overwhelming. It was too much. A lot of trauma based things happened to me. It doesn't affect me now because I'm an adult now. I figured it out. Like, I got my stuff together. To answer your question, that I feel like that is what it did. It's seen me at my most vulnerable, like my most shit, like downtime. So I
Right.
think that's when it was like I can fully put myself out there, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
first of all,
Yeah.
yeah, so sorry you went through that terrible
Yeah.
experience.
Sorry.
No, don't
Um,
be. Thank you.
but I'm glad that you've processed through it and you've come out the other side, and it sounds like you're in a better place now, so that's fantastic. But Chris, I'm gonna toss it to you, man, because this is kind of your wheelhouse. This is another thing
Yeah.
we've talked about in previous podcasts, especially with this idea of like the demonic and bringing negative energy into the house. It's just, I know, Amanda, you've listened to a lot of our podcasts, but isn't it crazy? Like this continues to be a theme
Yeah.
where it's like there's just a negative presence that is drawn on by people and it seems to be self perpetuated or created. And then these things start going haywire and crazy. So, Chris, I want to ask you, like, what are your perspectives from the demonic side? Do you have anything to add on?
One thing I will say, Amanda, real quick, is that Dean, I don't know if you felt the same way, but when you were telling your story, I had goosebumps the entire time.
I'm sorry.
I kept looking to my door down the hallway.
Mhm.
It felt like something was, kind of tuning in,
Yeah.
if you get my drift.
And
That happens to me frequently when I talk about that house that I grew up in.
yeah,
And I truly think what you experienced was something demonic. And in my discussions, like I don't know if you've listened to the demonology pods I've done with
I have with
JJ.
JJ.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
is awesome, by the way.
I will pass along the message. Maybe JJ, if you're listening to this, we could get you on a pod with Amanda as well. So I
I
could
that would
reach out to him
be awesome.
for you. But when I talk about this with JJ, I talk about this with Father Birdsong, and even talking with Dean and like my buddy Aaron. A lot of my close friends and family members, now that we're in our 30s, some of us are pushing our 40s, we kind of don't care about what people think anymore about this stuff because this shit is real. Like
Yes.
it's real. I will divulge this. Me and my wife, we are currently in the process of house hunting. Hopefully we'll be purchasing a home soon. The first home that we went to see, as soon as we stepped foot in that fucking house, I felt like I stepped back into the place where I live. And I
Nah.
was like, no, no, absolutely not. So when I went down to the basement, when we were touring that house, it felt like something was there that did not want me. We knew each other existed. And it's like, nah, we're going to have a problem here.
Right.
And I did want to ask you,
Mhm.
when you were a teenager, is that when you first felt that, we're going to call it Smeagol,
Right.
just to make fun of it? We
Yeah.
can't give that shit power. Don't give that shit power. Don't give that
Hell
shit
no.
fear. So, was that the first time you ever felt the presence of Gollum, or was that something that you kind of felt throughout your early life? Because I know personally for me, I've kind of felt things throughout my entire life, but it wasn't necessarily the same entity. Do you think whatever that thing was just always present in your home? Or what do you think that thing was?
I think that it was there, but didn't have enough, again, like energy to tap into it. Like I said, growing up in that negative environment, I was very depressed, along with the rest of my family. Uh, Depression runs in my family. So I think it was there, Chris, and it just grew. And like I said, with that happening to me, I think it just grew and just manifested itself because it wasn't anything. I always felt uncomfortable in the house, and probably because my grandfather would tell his stories. And I was always scared of the dark. And I think that that's kind of what, started it. But then, like I said, the constant arguing and the fighting and the drug use and the alcohol abuse in my house, it was a lot, and I would just shut myself in my room. And I I didn't really talk to people except for online. So I think, like I said, with that happening, it was always there, but not as strong.
Did your grandparents or your parents believe you when you told them like, "Hey, I feel like there's something here." Did they pay attention to it, or was it kind of
No,
like they brushed it off?
it was definitely brushed off because, like I said, they were Christian. Now, my grandfather was very kind of like you, Dean. He knew things were there, but just didn't want to give it power in a sense because obviously he was the one that would tell me the stories. My grandmother had nothing really to say.
I also wanted to ask about the farmhouse that you grew up in. That's particularly the. I mean, I don't know if this is in the same vein if you want to talk about it, but going back to the original story you told about the locket of hair in the fireplace, which is really it's just like a
Oh,
really
yeah.
crazy story. Like I'm telling you, like I was playing that vision in my head as you're talking about it. I'm like, yep, this is the beginning of a good horror movie.
Yeah.
I know it's probably not like this, but like I just pictured like a clean lock of hair with like a blue bow in it or something, and then you're just like, oh shit, like that's what
You're
I would
right.
do if I came across like I would say like, God damn it, like oh, okay, this is starting. Um,
Yeah, we're
anyway,
gonna make a TWR show, like a horror
yeah.
show with Netflix. Like each episode is based off of one of our guest stories.
You can make many
But
episodes.
but it'll just be us getting angry or like pissed off that we have to deal with this shit again. Like, oh god damn it! Like,
And you and your Ouija board, we gotta
oh,
bring that in there, Dean.
it's got to be a little bit of comedy in there to lighten the load and to get to take the power from the things.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, my question is like, have you had any changes in sensation or feeling, or have you had any other experiences that were separate from that heavy one that were paranormal related or even like cryptid or anything else? Because every time we talk to somebody who had something to do with the farmland, it was always like there's something about the tie to the land, there's something about the history. I mean, you also mentioned that you are part Native American. I think that something about being tied to the land that generates these energies and these feelings, which we all know, you know, even the craziest, most or like the hardest, staunchest person who is against anything, like you know, believing that anything's paranormal. I think it's scientific that you can say at the very least that there's some kind of energy feeling or something that's going on because you know we've talked about this before, but there are literally animals who can sense changes in electromagnetic fields and like
Yeah,
it just is a fact. Do you have anything to add on to that, like in terms of experiences to the land or to the farmland that you lived on? Because I think that
I
to me
do.
that's fascinating as well.
I do. So, one of my girlfriends, I have like intuition, like kind of like you, Chris. You when you said that you walked into that house and you felt something wasn't welcoming you, again, the Nate. So to go back to your question, Dean. So yes, I have felt like that intuition ever since that happened. It's almost like ever since it was gone, I got like a sixth sense almost like, I'm not going to do that. There's some shit in there. No. So my girlfriend's house at the time when I was in high school, she would always joke around that her house was haunted. And I'm like, okay, bullshit, whatever. Because at that time I had gotten that out of my head. And I'm half Cherokee, by the way. So when I actually went over to her house, it was me and a bunch of our other friends from high school. We were going to go over there and do drawings for art class. The moment I saw her door, I was like, I'm not going in. I don't want to go in. And she was like, I told you. She goes, what do you feel? I was like, there's something mean. There's something negative there. So it started to feel like that heaviness again. My family's old house, I sensed something was there. It wasn't evil. It was just there. And my brother had an experience, and he told me this over the weekend or over the week that I was there with my family. And he said that he's seen there was this one room that none of us would ever go in. And like I said, it wasn't nothing bad. It was just a presence. Just it just seemed like something trying to get noticed. Like, hey, I'm here. I want you to see that I'm here, but nothing negative. It was kind of very like calming. But for him, it was terrifying because the way that it showed itself to him is it held up one of his socks in the middle of the night across the hallway, and the damn thing just went like, just floated there. And he never told us until like 4 or 5 years ago. And I was like, dude, why didn't you say anything? I've had another experience at my ex-boyfriend's house. They never told me anything about their home, never felt anything in there. And I was laying in the bed in their spare bedroom because we never slept in the same bedroom. And I just seen like this outline of a man. And it was a man, but it was just a figure. It's just like a shadow. And it just looked, you could see that the head looked down at me and just nodded and then literally just coasted away down the hallway. But in that hallway, I did not like. Which always, they even would always shut the door. But whatever that man was, he would go into that hallway, into that room, which is where the negative was. So I woke up the next morning. I said, Jake, do you have something in your house? And he was like, holy shit, you seen the man. And I was like, fuck. Like, I don't want to feel this shit no more. Like it was too much. And it started to get too almost kind of like overcoming my life where it was just overwhelming and I had to like take a step back, and that's when I became religious. I followed in Christian stuff. I don't go to church or anything cuz to me, I don't have to go to church to believe in God or anything like that. Like as long as I have him by my side, I'm protected, so to speak. And the apartment that we live in now, we know is haunted because that this is actually built on Indian burial ground. It sucks.
Y'all gonna get some Wendigos and skinwalkers just
Please,
knocking
God,
on your
don't say
door.
that, Chris,
I
because
hope.
we
I'm
have
kidding.
coyotes here, and it fucking dude, I never heard a coyote in my life. And
Mm,
when they cry, when they kill something, I ran into the house. I had no idea what the hell was going on.
yeah, we got them here in Western Pennsylvania too.
Oh God, no.
Yeah, we really do. You know what's interesting with your story just now? You know how you said that started feeling overwhelmed? That sounds similar to my cousin, where he has the ability to see and feel things. I can only feel things. Thankfully, I can't see things. I never
Yeah,
want to.
you're lucky.
I never want to. And he said from a very young age, it's one of my very, very first episodes. He said that his parents were arguing very loudly. It was really bad. And he saw this swarm of flies flying around them.
Mm-mm.
And they couldn't see it, but he could. And he said he went into his room and he like curled up in a ball and was like, God or whoever, I don't want to see this. I don't want this gift. And he kind of just suppressed it ever since
Right.
then. His brother, on the other hand, is very open with it. He can walk into places and find very quickly that there's something here. But the way that you were relaying your story about, this is exhausting, it kind of reminds me of that because even now he doesn't like talking about stuff like this. He's like, dude, I don't want to talk about it. Like, don't
Right.
talk about ghosts, don't talk about demons, don't do anything. And I make fun of him all the time, but I get it. I completely understand. But when you saw that man, that shadowy figure, did you feel that it was a malevolent presence?
No.
Or did you kind of feel it was like, okay, I'm checking you out, making sure you're okay. And I'm
Yeah.
going to go back into that room and deal with whatever that evil thing was in there?
So thank you for that question. Also, Chris, I hope I answered Dean's question fully. But
Yeah, yeah,
the
absolutely.
the entity that was standing next to me was very calming, almost like comforting. Like, hey, I'm here. You will be okay. Don't go in there. I was laying on my side. I always lay on my left side and I always keep covers halfway over my shoulder. And like I said, when you could feel something's there, that's what it felt like, but it felt so comforting. And I opened my eyes and there he was. But you could see the outline of head look down, nod at me, and I literally pulled the covers off of me and watched him go into that room. And that was the room that I did not particularly like because whatever the fuck was in that room was just not cool. But I didn't understand in my mind, and neither did Jake, why he would go into that room. So I don't know if he was something good and protecting from that, protecting people from that area. I don't know, but there were other spirits in that house. One of them was a little girl, and she would always hang socks up on their chandelier. There is absolutely no way, guys. Let me explain this to you. You would need a 20 to 40-foot ladder to get to their chandelier. And these things would be perfectly placed on top of over the lights. So I never seen the little girl, never witnessed the socks thing. This is what him and his mother had told me. But the father had nothing to do with it. Even though he seen it, he didn't give a crap. He didn't believe in it at all.
Common theme that I find among men in general. I talked to my dad about this when I was in Florida a week ago visiting my parents. My wife and my sister and my mom had went to go shopping or whatever. So my dad was sitting in the living room, like watching TV, relaxing, having a drink. So I pulled up a chair next to him and I'm like, you need to tell me what you went through and what you experienced in that house. And he's like, yeah, I experienced stuff and kind of ignored it pretty much. Is always a common theme. And I'll just throw this question out there. Dean, Amanda, why do y'all think that is? Do you think it's because us dudes have to keep up this image of mental and emotional toughness? Because I can't be seen like freaking out over unseen entities in my house or something like that. I'll just throw the question out there.
Dean, do you want to answer first? Because I have my answer.
I'm gonna take some shots at the male.
Yeah.
The male here's the thing about guys. Okay, I'm a guy, so I can say this. Guys can't handle. We can't really handle a lot. I mean, we can handle
No,
a
no,
lot
you
of.
can't.
We can handle a lot of one thing or maybe two things, and we do handle a lot of one or two things at any given time, like work and like shit. But like when you start piling on periphery, like we're not good at that. If you find a guy who's good at that, then you've hit the jackpot. That's how I see it. I think the average guy is just they just can't be bothered to flex beyond what their immediate experience is because they feel like they have a greater responsibility. Not saying they do, just saying that that's a residual feeling that I think is part of the zeitgeist or like part of the like the normal progression of society or whatever. You just men just feel like they have to take on more, but they just can't handle a lot more beyond that. So I think that's what happens. So not everybody's like that, by the way, but I think in the short, that's probably what's going on.
And I'm gonna have to agree on that too. I feel like it's also a pride thing. Like if they show any sign of weakness or
Oh yeah, yeah.
talking about it, they're like, oh, that person's gonna have me and like talk shit about me. And it's like, I really do hate that society back in the day, oh, men can't cry, men can't show emotion. No, bullshit. Yes, they can. And it doesn't make
Yeah.
you weak. You're a human being, for the love of God.
Yeah.
Cry, talk, please talk. And I'm a very tomboy. I mean, you guys can see me, nobody else can, but I'm very tomboy. But I do agree with that, Chris. I think it's just a pride thing, and Dean is definitely right with that.
By the way, I feel so lucky to live in the time period we do because like we all grew up in the same time period and we can
Yeah.
remember the transition from like remember in the 80s. I know it's like we were close enough to the 80s, but we might not have been too aware of things in the 80s. But like in the 80s, that was like the last bastion of like nerd is the down you know what I mean? Like nerd, like
Yeah.
Revenge of the Nerds or like whatever. Like it was
Yeah.
terrible to be a nerd. And
Yep.
then thankfully we had this progression of cultural change. So we experienced that side, but now we
That
can
was well into
apply
the
a
late
time.
2000s too as well,
You think
man,
so too?
because
Yeah,
yeah,
at least
A little bit, a little bit.
some
yeah,
residual.
yeah,
But
because there's a lot of
nowadays,
shit
yeah,
that we like now that people clowned
exactly.
us for back in the day. Like,
Oh, and I
I know
can
people that made fun of you for liking Dragon Ball and all this shit, and now, like, you see them post on social media, "Oh, man, I can't wait for the new Dragon Ball series to
Yeah.
come out." Like, "Okay, you cunt."
We all used to sit on the end of the bed and try to go Super
The Super
Saiyan, okay?
Saiyan.
Like we all
yeah.
tried it. We all tried it.
Yeah.
But
I
but I
I
mean
uh, to get back on that 80s kick, I was born in 86. So I'm over here like I was the cool nerd before it was cool. I cosplayed. I still cosplay. I remember getting made fun of in school for the stuff that I liked, and I'm like, well,
Did you
damn
do
it,
Dungeons& and Dragons?
dude. So low key, I couldn't get into that. I got into
Mm.
Yu-Gi-Oh more.
Oh, I did Yu-Gi-Oh! More too.
Yeah, I loved it. Cool backstory. Let's tread away from the paranormal for a minute. I grew up with nothing but nerd shit my whole life. My grandparents owned a comic book shop. So my grandfather,
wow, that's super
oh,
cool.
are you ready for this, Dean, Chris? And I'm not bullshitting you. My grandfather collected comics ever since he was a little boy, and he had the original Supermans, the original Spider-Man. My mother took it upon herself one day when they passed away. Everything was supposed to be inherited to me. She got into the garage before any of us.
Oh god.
All of it was discarded.
Jeez, was it rated? Do you know if it was rated before it was discarded?
No, no,
Oh my
we
god,
knew
just
nothing about grading at that time. And we had original Pokemon cards, Yu-Gi-Oh cards, collectors Disney memorabilia, gone. All gone.
oh no.
Oh,
One last thing too is
Mm.
I had a this is probably isn't as this is not anywhere near as significant as your stories with the Charizard and the original comics, but like I had a bunch of VHS. Remember like VHS like Disney back in the day, like they had the super cool cases and they were this like kind of squishy. It just felt good to like press on the edges or whatever. We all chewed on them. Come on, let's be honest. We all chewed on 'em.
Diamond
Um,
collection.
yeah, the diamond collection, and then the myth that went around for a while, like, oh, if you have this specific diamond collection, it's worth like a $10,000 or whatever. And like we got all excited and we found it, and then we found out that was just like, it was phony. Giving into the nerd culture and being open about like, more open about emotions or whatever. But I think that like when you get older, it's a very special time that you can reflect back. And this ties back into the paranormal stuff as well, because you reflect back on the experiences you had, but I feel like you do it through a lens that isn't as jaded. It's not as one dimensional. Like you have more of a robust set of perceptions that you can look at the thing, and then it makes it more comprehensive and special. And that's really what happened to me, actually all of us as well, because like we think back to these experiences, and then it feels different. So it's kind of special in a way, I think, that we're at this age, at this time where we can sit here, talk to each other in different states, thousands of miles away. Yeah, that's just me nerding all over the podcast again.
No, I think it's super cool too, and I agree with you. I mean, technology has gotten so far, and I love when you guys rant about technology and like society nowadays. I'm like, ooh, that's gonna have to be another topic sometime.
So that was a nice little recovery
Yeah, help me
discussion
calm
from
down.
the paranormal, but let's jump right back into it and pick it up from the socks and the chandelier. So you've had the experience with the darker than dark golem, then you had the shadow man entity appear to you, and then your ex-boyfriend and his mother told you about socks showing up on the chandelier. So picking up from there, what else happened to you that was of the paranormal nature? Like, did you see more things?
Basically, ever since all of that stuff, like I said, I've been able to feel things. I'm very in tune with things. Anytime I've walked into houses, I'll just stand there for a few minutes and get a feel for it. And I haven't felt that in a very long time. I know I mentioned in the email so sorry guys, just FYI, my memory is being shot. So if I'm processing like AOL processor for a minute, like I'm just loading. Give me a minute.
Completely
So,
understand.
UFO
Understandable.
stuff. There was a graveyard that we would always pass by when I was little, and me and my mom recently passed it this weekend. Nothing has changed, obviously, except for more, unfortunately, people being buried there. When I was 6 years old, again, had no idea what the hell UFOs was, nothing. So me and my granny was the one that always drove, and it was my grandmother, my grandfather in the passenger seat, and me in the back seat of the van. And it was nighttime, and they had just picked me up from my mom's house. So we're driving back home to our house, and this, what, dude, it was like huge ass black round thing, but it had only, I think, like 4 lights on it, but it was like hovering right above our fucking van. And I'm just sitting there looking up, like, what the hell is that? And my grandfather goes, We need to go, Sarah. That was my grandmother's name. He was like, We need to go. Just go. So she was like flooring it, and this thing just would just follow, but slowly. We're going fast, but this thing's moving slow, but it's still keeping up. That's what didn't make sense to me. And then all of a sudden the lights went away and it went away. So again, I'm assuming UFO. Um, that was the only time I'd seen some weird shit like that. Another paranormal thing was just I started seeing shadow people, a lot of shadow people every now and then, but it would be in homes. It would only be in homes. But after a while, they weren't nothing negative. They were just there. So I don't know if like I developed something where I could just not not unfortunate, excuse me, but I don't see that stuff anymore. And I'm wondering if it's because I became more and more closer to God, or I don't know, or maybe I've just mentally blocked it out.
Were these shadow people experiences, were they glimpses out of the corner of your eye, or were they kind of, similar to the golem where you look right at it and you would see it for a while?
Some of them were glimpses out of my eyes, but there were a few that would just stand dormant, just kind of like you're just standing there and just perfectly still, but it wouldn't last very long. But I'm sorry, but every time I mention that thing, the golem thing, I haven't felt this way, but it feels like that intensity again. I've never seen anything like that again, thank God. And I hope I never do. And I think that's ultimately why I never talked about it, because going back to what I said about the boy when he was praying, through text, is I feel like he said we couldn't talk ever again and not to talk about it. So I felt like deep down, if I spoke about it, I think that's another reason why I kept silent, not only just for the fear of people not believing me, because I was already an outcast as it was. I didn't want to be even more of an outcast or called a weirdo, or worst of all, people get called fucking crazy. And it's like, sometimes I wish, guys, these people that sit there and say that you're crazy, sometimes I'm like, please, God, fucking just show them what the hell I seen so they can shut the hell up just one time. But it was so negative and so evil. I would never wish that upon anybody.
This is why I like having these conversations with people because it kind of sparks things in my mind. And I'm going to throw this out to you guys. Have you ever had an experience where you've walked up to somebody, you're meeting them for the first time, and they don't know you, you don't know them. So it's that weird, awkward stage when you first meet somebody, but they just look at you like you see it. You see them looking at you like they're seeing a ghost or like they're seeing, like they just have this weird, wild look in their eye. Not that they're trying to not the wild look that someone gets when they're like malicious towards you, but they just you can tell that they see that there's something off about something. And I have to wonder in those situations, like, did they dream about you last night and they just don't want to say it because they're meeting you for the first time? Or do they see something behind you that they've never seen before? Like, have you guys ever had that experience? Because I've had something like that happen at least a handful of times in my life where you meet someone for the first time or you walk by somebody and they just give you this look like they know you from somewhere or they see something around you. It's just super weird.
Chris, I'll let you go ahead, but I have had one experience.
Sure. I would say, yeah, I've had that. I've encountered people where I became very good friends with them fairly quickly because it felt like you knew them. There was some sort of connection. There was a friend that I had in college. We met and we just clicked. He was a super chill dude, and it felt like we were friends for years. So I genuinely think that's a thing. But also, Dean, you are correct in which, you encounter certain people and it's like, I don't fucking like you. You
Yeah.
make me uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
I get that a lot. Walking
Wait.
down walking downtown, I
Oh yeah,
get
of
that
course you're
shit.
down.
Holy shit, dude. It's like you just walk past someone and you like make eye contact with them. It's like, nah, there's
Bitch.
something wrong with you. No, get
I
away from
agree.
me.
I agree. So I have had great experiences with just clicking and resonating with people. Like, great experiences. Some of my closest friends, we literally would just made eye contact at conventions, was like instant friends. I'm like, it was awesome. Now, when I worked at Disney, on the other hand, oh God, no, 7 years of daily dose of fuckery. And I was like, I really don't like you. I just don't talk to me. Don't look at me. You definitely don't. There's something wrong with you. Not in like rude way, but just their energy. So I believe in auras. I have a very calm aura, from what I've been told. My friend used to be a Wiccan. I was very close with her. We're not friends any longer, but she was Wiccan, and she would always tell me, Amanda, you have such a calming aura. And I feel like that's also probably why I don't get the weird shit that I do anymore, because there's no more negativity in my life. I've done so much positive things with my life and made it worthwhile, and I've done more things in my life than a lot of people have. But I have met so many people. Like I said, especially working at Disney, you meet people all over the world. And some of these people, you're just like, it's almost like a vibration. You don't, no.
I've heard there's just the craziest stories. People who have worked at major theme parks, especially Disney World or Disneyland, because they have like those programs where you go and like you work for peanuts, but like you're just getting slammed every day, like under the worst conditions, and
It
like,
is true.
oh man, and it's just like on top of that, you're meeting like some of the worst people. Yeah, I don't know. I could never imagine working in a situation like that.
Don't ever. Don't ever. Just enjoy it from the outside. Don't enjoy it from the inside.
One thing that I want to go back to, Amanda,
Mhm.
and real quick, my sister says that she can see auras as well. She's like, your
Oh,
aura
cool.
flickers between white and red. And I'm like, okay, so I can Kaioken, thank you. But
That's badass.
yeah. Yeah. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, or like,
I
you're,
can't answer that
yeah,
for you.
type of thing. You said something that I found really interesting. You said that this stuff kind of stopped once you became religious, and you were kind of deciding, whether it was you became because of you were being religious that it stopped, or because you blocked it out. I say time and time again, I went to school for history. I like ancient history. I like studying religions. And one thing I will say is that in every fucking religion that has existed and still exists on this planet today, they have some sort of rite of exorcism and
Mhm.
cleansing, something of that sort, to deal with evil spirits and evil entities and their demonic equivalent. Religions that have nothing to do with each other, like
Right.
Buddhism and Hinduism, existed long before Christianity,
Right.
and they have those rituals for cleansing and combating with those things. And Dean, we talked about like Asia as well, like they have things like that. And when we talked to JJ in Japan, they have Amori charms, they have all these
Oh, yeah,
different
the
things.
Japanese stuff fascinates me.
Yeah, I have one right here from Japan that JJ got for me.
You're lucky.
And And I personally think that, there's something to that.
Mhm.
And you shouldn't, no one should be ashamed to believe what they believe in. If you truly believe that you turning more towards your religion was something that, protected you even more,
Yeah, it's like
I
a
think that's,
barrier.
I think that's completely valid, because I always tell this story of my cousin with the door opening and he's saying the power of Christ compels you to the door and it fucking slams shut.
Yeah, no, dude.
Like that's something, there's something to that.
Yeah, I agree. It's making to me when I heard that story that you would tell, like you guys literally, like I said, are the biggest reason why I felt safe and comfortable to come out to, because I knew I wasn't going to be judged or made fun of like later on in the podcast, like, oh, can you believe it? No. I feel like with your cousin saying that, it took it as a provoke, like it was being provoked, like, oh, you really want, let me show you type thing. And I feel like that's how it manifests too, is if you want it to show itself, it's going to. If you think negatively, it's going to show itself because you're feeding it. I feel deep down that people do believe in this stuff. But again, the whole society thing has made it where, oh no, if you talk about this, you're just copying other people or you're looking on the internet. First of all, fuck the internet. I don't care about the internet. I could give a fuck less about social media. It has ruined society. It has. I'm sorry. I grew up very old school. What the hell would these people do without cell phones? They would have no clue what to do. But I feel like everybody believes in something, obviously, but they're too scared to come out, or they're too, you know, prideful, to admit it. And that's the biggest thing. Like, you guys' podcast helps people come out. Like, I don't remember the one young lady that was on there, and she was nervous at the beginning, And she was like, I might be nervous. And then she finally opened up immediately. And I was like, I think I'm going to do this. So,
Yeah,
like,
we're glad you came on.
thank
Um,
you.
it's crazy too, the cultural divides. I think the way you're speaking, it's very westernized, or your example, it sounds like a very westernized perspective, which is absolutely true. Like in America, especially growing up, like we've talked about this a million times with everybody, but you have parents or whatever who or can't be bothered with this sort of thing when you want to try to talk to them about it back then or share experiences. But then, Chris, you were you said you got your father to open up about it after he got older, and I think there is some of that bleeding, maybe because globalization thing is still churning with social media and stuff. Because I know we've also mentioned in the past, like Japan, places like Japan, or even like Southeast Asia or something. So many people believe in something. Like there's like, oh, of course there's ghosts. Like the majority of people are like, of course there's spirits. Of course there's. How can you not believe in that? It's just part of our culture and our history. But then you go to places like America and it's like probably like 50-50 at best. It does to me kind of feel like things are shifting, and it's kind of exciting to be a part of that, like even a super small part. But like we're talking to people, they're sharing their stories, and we're doing it in an objective way that's not criticizing, and we're just asking pertinent questions, and it's just super fascinating. And then but at the very least, it's just awesome to share stories with people, because that's like the human experience, right? Like we're here, we're talking to each other, like we might as well have fun doing it. So
All
like,
right.
yeah,
I did have one more quick story. My mom just texted me.
yeah,
She's like, don't forget my story. So while I was there, I told my mom and dad that I would be on you guys' podcast. I was like, I said, you guys got to give me more. Did you guys ever have an experience? And so my mom was like, well, I don't really talk about it much. I don't know what to say. My mom is, sometimes she'll believe, sometimes she won't. So it's one of those things. But when they were trying to have my brother, uh she said that she believes it was an angel. Okay. And I'm like, when she was describing it to me, I'm over here like, yeah, it sounds like it, but what do I know? So they didn't think that they were going to have a baby. And she was nervous. She was scared. So she woke up one night and there was just this illuminating person, just all like kind of like a soft white glow. And then she said that it came up to her, whispered in her ear, he's on his way. And she just completely pushed my dad away and said, Steve, please wake up. He would not wake up. And then my dad said he's seen a priest, and said, and it was weird because my dad had an odd experience with the priest. He said that the priest looked at him like he was pissed off and said, he's on his way. And I'm like, what?
creepy.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how to like, but this was all in the same night. And he finally had woken up with her panicking. So you have an angel and a priest visiting. That was very weird. So that was their experience.
Things like that where you just have to you don't even wonder anymore. It's just like, you're just like, really? Come on, man. Like, really? Question I have is what do they think is the significance of that, or what do you think is the significance of that on the deepest sense? Like, what do you think was actually reaching out, and what came to fruition in your mind, like the most in your craziest vision?
As I mentioned before, my mother goes, teeter tottering between yes, there's a God, and no, there's not God, and so on and so forth. And for that to come to her, I didn't say anything on Sunday, but in my back of my mind, I'm like, bro, you were visited by something. I feel like it was possibly a family member, or it could have been an angel reassuring her, because my mom has severe anxiety too, and she's constantly worried, constantly overthinking, like me. So I feel like that was like a sense of calm, like, hey, everything's okay. You are going to have a baby. And I do have my brother. He's 27. Uh and for my dad's experience, that one was kind of odd to me, because the way that he said that the priest looked at him was kind of like a scowl, like, what the fuck did you do type thing. But like, my brother is awesome. Like, he's cool as shit. So I didn't, to answer your question with that, I don't know what that message could have been, but I feel like because priests are so, connected with their religion, I feel like a priest is needed to have a messenger, I guess, in a sense. So I feel like that angel was connected with that priest. That was where I thought the moment that, and I did this on purpose. I asked them separately what their weirdest experiences were. Neither of them knew what either of them were talking about. So it was strange that they both mentioned that in the same day.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So, what you meant was, what you were saying was like they didn't know, like they didn't coordinate beforehand. They
No.
both had the same story that was the weirdest experience, and
Yeah.
that's fascinating too. Had they ever talked about that beforehand, or was
No.
that the first time that? Okay, so that's the first time that they
Very
linked it
first
up
time I've ever
together.
heard that. And
Wow.
the very first time they ever talked about it. So
Yeah,
I was
that's
like, oh my god, like this is good. So
yeah.
that's my belief. Guys, I'm sorry that my boyfriend wasn't able to join. He loves history just as much as you, Chris. Like he has taught me so much about it, and I'm like, holy shit, I didn't even know that. Like, I didn't even know this. Like, so I believe that, like you said, religions, they all have that exorcist, they all have their own form of that. And I guess for me, the same goes like, you every religion has like an angel or like a messenger or something like that. That's to me that it was a message to them that hey, everything's okay. He will be okay. So
It's just so unexplainable. They both have the same experience, don't talk about it for years. And when you finally do open up about it, it's like, oh, hey, wow, well, this actually happened. I did want to ask you, and I don't know if you know your boyfriend's stories
I
or
do.
if he would he be okay with you sharing them or
So his was just very simple, and it's kind of unfortunate. He used to be religious. He's not so much anymore. I'm trying to lead him down the path again. But so when I asked him, or I told him about the podcast because he started listening to you guys and he loves you guys too. He was like, man, the only damn story that I got is when he went to, it was his brother uh, and going to their friend's house. Well, he just got this weird feeling about his friend's house, like this just unnatural. Again, like we were talking earlier, unnatural feeling about this house. So they're all staying up playing video games, and they heard Chris. I think it's you where you the squirrels with timbers on or something like that. They just heard footsteps,
the
immense
footsteps? Yeah.
footsteps. So his brother Michael was just brushing it off. Alex was not. Like he was like, dude, there's somebody fucking walking in this house. And he's like, no, there but his friend had told them, hey, we do have a ghost. Michael didn't believe it. Alex went in with the possibility. And they were young. They did hear that. He never went back to his friend's house, and nobody else ever went over there ever again. The experience that happened with us here in the house, as I mentioned way back earlier, that this house or these apartments are haunted. So we were the very first people to move into this building itself because there's 3 buildings to the apartment complex. Well, this one was built and we got it back in December. Well, I know how condensation works. I am a huge OCD clean freak. You would think nobody fucking lives here with how clean I keep my house. So we're in the bathroom, and my shaving cream bottle, I know people can't see this, but so it was just sitting there. We're both, chatting about nerdy shit and brushing our teeth and getting ready to go to bed. My shaving cream bottle goes all the way up forward to the side and then back towards me. We both dropped our toothbrushes and we were like, we're not saying anything. We're gesturing, get the fuck out of the bathroom. So we just left everything as it was. I didn't touch the shaving cream, nothing. So the next morning, Obviously, it was in the same spot. And then we heard footsteps. We would hear footsteps, like people are walking upstairs. We would hear people walking up and down the hallway. Dude, guys, there was nobody living here. And this is in the middle of the night, like 12, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And we would hear footsteps walking back and forth. It didn't bother me none because I'm just like, whatever. As long as I don't see shit, I'm cool. But the shaving cream bottle was a little much for me. And my cats, as we all know, like you said earlier, Chris, that animals do have that sixth sense. They will always, at a certain time of night between 12 and 1 o'clock, well, both of them will go to the bathroom door and they will both arch and just, that sound that they make, like the little, like how they do with birds outside. They will do that to the door and they will protect us. They will not let us go to the bathroom.
That's intense. And I can second that with the cat stuff. So we used to have 4 cats. We have 3 now. He was a big old Maine Coon. Me and my wife, we used to live before we moved into where we live now. We lived in an apartment complex a mile up the road.
Mhm.
And my sister came over once to spend the night. And she was living in New York at the time. She slept on the couch. She said, my cats all sat on the top of the couch and just stared at that room in the hallway like at 2 in the morning and would not leave. And I always felt like really uncomfortable when I
Right.
was there by myself because my wife had a job at the time that would make her work third shift and she wouldn't come back home till like 1 or 2 in the morning and I would stay up. It would be like one of those things where you felt like something was looking at you. So yeah, I definitely get the thing with the whole cat stuff.
Yeah, animals for sure have that sixth sense. And honestly, my whole life I've had animals, especially cats. They're like my spirit animal. But yeah, the whole animal thing, I keep them as protection too. They know. We also have a corgi puppy, but he's too excited over treats to figure out anything.
So, Amanda, you've shared a plethora of stories, some of them very terrifying. We had a nice little break in between conversation with nerdy stuff.
Oh,
Before we close out today, did you have any final words that you wanted to say to anyone that's listening to the show that might be hesitant to talk about their experiences?
yeah, just come on, share your stories. Don't be afraid to talk about them. For God's sakes, it's taken me almost 20 plus years to talk about what I just shared today. And it took a lot out of me mentally at the beginning, but Chris and Dean are awesome. They don't pressure you. They make you feel comfortable. Like, I really hope more people come out with their stories and feel, hey, this is a place of comforting where we can speak about our experiences, whether they be, big or small. That's what I hope.
And Amanda, I want to thank you for being on the show today. You
Thank
were
you.
you were an awesome guest. We had some
Yeah.
really great conversation. Unfortunately, your boyfriend couldn't make it on, so we'll have to bring you guys back on for a part
Sure.
2 for him to share some more of his stories and we could have some fun, interesting discussions. I think there's a lot more that we could cover with the paranormal and UFOs. And so I'm really looking forward to that. So, Amanda, why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you and your business?
So it is going to be a mouthful, guys. I do apologize. So you can find me on Instagram. That's where I mostly reside. TikTok, I have zero interest in. But on my Instagram, you can find me on it's autography luxury detailing. Yeah, it's a mouthful. So I will send this to Dean and Chris so you can have the link to that. I own my own business. I do paint correction and ceramic coating professionally on vehicles and among other things that you can ceramic coat. Also, I'm opening up a shop in Illinois. That is not going to be the name. It's going to be Supreme Car Wash Detailing. And that hopefully will be opening up in mid-October. So looking forward to that.
You heard her, folks. Go ahead and give her page a follow. Check out her business. I took a look at some of the work she's done and the pictures look awesome. So
Thank you.
go ahead and check her out. And folks, thank you so much for listening to today's show. Like Amanda said, if you have a story that you would like to share with us, go ahead and come on. We love interfacing with the community. We love hearing people's stories. And thanks for listening to the show, everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you,
you guys
Amanda. Take
again.
care.
Yeah, bye guys. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into today's episode of The Wandering Road. You can find us on Apple, Google, Spotify, and most podcast platforms. Be sure to subscribe and share. Also, don't forget to give a follow on Instagram at twroadpodcast and follow my TikTok at twrpodcast. Take care, and I'll catch you on the next one.